I stood in my father's empty law office while my siblings divided his clients like vultures picking at carrion. My brother Marcus texted, "Stop being dramatic. Dad's gone, we need to discuss the partnership buyout." They wanted to cash out his 40% stake in the firm for my cousin's startup investment, but they had no idea what I'd discovered in his private files. If you're reading this, let me know in the comments where you're from. Let me take you back to how this betrayal began. 2 months ago, my father, Judge William Hartwell, died suddenly of a heart attack at 68. The memorial service was scheduled for Friday, October 13th. That same day, my brother Marcus decided to host a celebration dinner for our cousin Jake's new tech company, because apparently dead fathers shouldn't interfere with business opportunities. My sister Rachel had called the night before Dad's memorial, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We can't reschedule Jake's investor dinner. The venture capitalists fly out Saturday morning. The restaurant deposits are non-refundable." I stood in Dad's study, holding the phone with one hand and his favorite whiskey glass with the other. The one engraved "World's Greatest Dad" that I'd given him for his 65th birthday when we still thought he had years left. "Of course," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded hollow. "Family business comes first." The irony wasn't lost on me, so while I sat in the front pew of St. Andrew's Cathedral, watching my father's flag-draped casket being carried by exactly 6 pallbearers, myself, his law clerk David, 2 funeral directors, his longtime bailiff Frank, and his former colleague Judge Peterson, Marcus was toasting champagne glasses across town. 6 people for a man who'd served 20 years on the bench, who'd mentored dozens of young lawyers, who'd never missed a birthday or holiday. 6 people. Because his own family chose networking over mourning. The funeral director, a dignified woman named Miss Collins, kept glancing at the empty pews behind me. "Mr. Hartwell, would you like us to wait a few more minutes? Sometimes family gets delayed in traffic." "This is everyone," I told her, my voice steady as steel. "We can proceed." But they weren't delayed. They were exactly where they wanted to be. That evening, I came home to 23 missed calls and 51 text messages. Not condolences, not apologies, just a digital tsunami of excuses about why Jake's investor dinner was more important than Dad's memorial service. "Marcus couldn't make it because of the dinner, but you know Dad would understand business priorities." "Rachel, so sorry Alex, but you know how these VCS operate, it's now or never." My youngest brother Kevin. "We'll visit the grave this weekend. Promise, bro." The only honest message came from Marcus himself. "Alex, we need to discuss Dad's partnership share, call me Monday." Partnership share, not Dad's legacy, not his life's work. Partnership share, like my father, was just an asset to be liquidated and distributed. I poured myself Dad's favorite bourbon and made a decision that would change everything. If my family wanted to treat Dad's death like a corporate acquisition, then I'd give them exactly what they deserved. But they'd have to wait to discover what that meant. Monday morning arrived with Marcus pounding on my apartment door at 8 a.m. He didn't even wait for coffee before launching into his pitch. "Alex, we need to talk about Dad's 40% stake in Hartwell and Associates," he announced, settling himself on my couch like he owned it. "Jake secured preliminary interest from 3 VC firms, but he needs seed money fast. That partnership buyout could be exactly what he needs." I set down my coffee mug slowly, processing the audacity. "Dad's been dead for 4 days, Marcus. And that's tragic truly, but opportunities like this don't wait." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like business proposals. "Jake's developed an AI legal research platform. The preliminary valuations are incredible. One firm mentioned a potential $50 million exit strategy within 3 years. How generous of them," my voice could have frozen hell. "Tell me, did Jake enjoy the investor dinner? I heard it was productive." Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable for exactly 2 seconds. "Alex, don't be like that. You know we wanted to be there for Dad, but sometimes life forces tough decisions." "Tough decisions," I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness. Like choosing between honoring your father and chasing venture capital. That's not fair and you know it. Marcus's voice took on that whining quality I remembered from childhood. The dinner was scheduled months ago. Dad would have understood he was a businessman too, was he? Dad who turned down 3 corporate law offers to stay in public service. Dad who'd once told me that Marcus only called when he needed money or connections. Dad who'd privately referred to Jake as that entitled little sociopath. Besides, Marcus continued, oblivious to my internal commentary, Dad named you as executor specifically because he trusted you to make smart financial decisions for the family. There it was, the real reason for this early morning visit. Marcus had been awake all night, calculating how to access Dad's partnership equity. The partnership agreement has specific clauses about succession, I said carefully. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. Exactly, and I'm sure Dad would want the money to benefit the family. Jake's startup could make us all wealthy, Alex. He's the only one in our generation with real entrepreneurial vision. The only one with entrepreneurial vision. As if Dad had never built a successful law practice from nothing. As if his 40 years of legal work was just a placeholder until Jake's brilliance could shine through. The partnership buyout has specific stipulations, I continued, watching Marcus's face carefully. Dad was very particular about the succession process. Well, what are they? Marcus practically bounced in his seat. I'm sure we can work something out, maybe a loan against the eventual payout. Jake's already got letters of intent from potential clients. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, ostensibly for more coffee, but really to hide my expression. Marcus's greed was even worse than I'd anticipated. The money is locked in probate for 6 months, I called over my shoulder. Standard legal procedures. 6 months, Marcus's voice cracked. But Jake needs the seed money now. These VCS won't wait. Alex, you have to do something. Can't you petition for an emergency release? I returned with my coffee and sat back down, studying my brother's desperate face. He'd always been the golden child, Dad's presumed successor in the legal world. But Dad had been disappointed when Marcus chose corporate law over public service, when he'd prioritized money over justice. Why is Jake's startup so urgent? I asked innocently. Can't he wait a year or two to properly develop the product? Marcus's face went through several color changes. Well, the AI market is moving fast. If we don't get in now, we'll miss the entire opportunity window. I sipped my coffee slowly. And expensive, apparently. Alex, please, this investment means everything to Jake and to all of us. After everything our family's been through with Dad's declining health, seeing the next generation succeed would be healing. Marcus's eyes filled with crocodile tears. Everything our family had been through. Marcus's sacrifice had been visiting Dad twice during his final month and complaining about hospital parking fees. I'll consider it, I lied smoothly. Let me review Dad's exact wishes and see what options we have. Marcus brightened immediately. Really? Oh, Alex, thank you. Jake will be so thrilled. I knew we could count on you. As I walked him to the door, Marcus turned back with an afterthought. Oh, and Alex, maybe don't mention this conversation to Rachel and Kevin yet. You know how they get about money discussions before the will reading. Translation. Don't tell anyone else about the partnership value until I figure out how to claim the largest share for Jake's benefit. Of course not, I agreed, already planning exactly who I'd be calling first. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Cemetery, where Dad rested in the family plot next to Mom's grave. The headstone was still being engraved, but I'd placed fresh flowers and a small American flag. Dad had served in Vietnam before law school. Well, Dad, I said, settling into the portable chair I'd brought. Marcus visited today. He sends his love and his business proposal. The autumn wind rustled through the maple trees overhead, and I could almost hear Dad's dry chuckle. He'd had the most wonderful sense of ironic humor, the kind that made opposing lawyers nervous in his courtroom. He wants your partnership share for Jake's startup. Can you believe that? Your legacy reduced to seed money for that pretentious kid who couldn't be bothered to attend your memorial. I opened the folder I'd brought. Dad's will, partnership documents, and most importantly, the sealed envelope he'd given me during his final week in the hospital. Alex, the letter began in his careful handwriting. If you're reading this, then the heart attack finally got me. I'm sorry for leaving you to deal with our family's greed alone. I know exactly what they'll do. Marcus will want the partnership money for one of his schemes, Rachel will want her share for that house renovation, and Kevin will just go along with whatever they decide. He'd known. Of course he'd known. Dad had always been the smartest person in any room. The partnership agreement contains a clause that I've never mentioned to your siblings. Section 47C states that my equity can only be transferred to a blood relative who has practiced law for at least 5 years and demonstrated commitment to public service. You're the only one who qualifies. I smiled through my tears. Even from the grave, Dad was still protecting his legacy from Marcus's corporate ambitions. There's something else, son. I've discovered some irregularities in Marcus's firm. Check his client trust accounts. I think you'll find some very interesting discrepancies. Jake's startup isn't just poorly planned, it's a vehicle for money laundering. I have documentation in my private safe. The combination is Mom's birthday. My blood ran cold. Dad had suspected criminal activity and kept quiet to protect the family name, but now he was giving me the tools to expose it. If they pressure you about the money, remember that justice delayed is not justice denied. Sometimes the best revenge is simply allowing people to face the consequences of their own actions. Use your discretion, but don't let them dishonor everything I worked for. The letter was signed, "Love always, your father who knew better." I folded the letter carefully and drove straight to Dad's house. The safe was hidden behind his law books, and Mom's birthday, October 23rd, opened it immediately. Inside were financial records, emails, and recorded phone conversations that painted a damning picture of Marcus's law firm. The client money had been diverted into Jake's fake startup. The AI legal platform was a shell company designed to clean dirty money from Marcus's shadier clients. Jake wasn't a tech entrepreneur, he was a money launderer with a computer science degree. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake himself. "Uncle Alex, Marcus told me the incredible news about Grandpa's partnership money. I can't wait to show you the platform demo. This is going to revolutionize legal technology. The platform that didn't exist. The revolutionary technology that was just a front for criminal activity." While I'd been mourning my father, his own grandson had been planning to steal his legacy to fund a criminal enterprise. I typed back, "We'll talk soon, Jake." Another text came immediately, "Awesome. I've already started drafting the investment documents. We'll make Grandpa so proud." Proud. Dad, who'd spent his career putting criminals in prison, would be proud to fund money laundering. The delusion was breathtaking. I spent the evening reading through Dad's evidence file. Bank records showing client funds being transferred to shell companies. Emails between Marcus and known criminals discussing investment opportunities. Recorded phone calls where Jake explicitly discussed using the startup to clean money from drug trafficking proceeds. Dad had been building a case against his own son and grandson, probably hoping they'd change course before he had to act. But now the decision was mine. Tuesday brought Rachel to my doorstep, followed by Kevin an hour later. They settled into my living room with the same hungry expressions Marcus had worn. "Alex," Rachel began with her practiced, concerned voice, "Marcus mentioned you might need help managing Dad's estate. We just want to make sure you're not making emotional decisions during this difficult time." Emotional decisions like refusing to fund criminal enterprises with Dad's life savings. "What kind of decisions are you worried about?" I asked, genuinely curious about their strategy. Rachel and Kevin exchanged glances, clearly they'd rehearsed this intervention. Well, Kevin cleared his throat. Marcus mentioned that Dad left some business interests that might benefit everyone. We think it would be wise to liquidate those assets quickly to avoid market volatility. Market volatility. How creative. And what assets would those be? I kept my voice neutral. The law firm partnership, Rachel said bluntly. Marcus said it was substantial enough to fund several family projects. Several family projects. Like Jake's money laundering operation and Rachel's McMansion renovation, did Marcus explain what those projects were? Another glance between siblings. Rachel took the lead. Look, Alex, we know Dad meant well, but he was old-fashioned about business opportunities. If we pool the inheritance, everyone benefits from Jake's startup. The boy's brilliant, he could make us all wealthy. All wealthy through criminal proceeds, but they didn't mention that part. Besides, Kevin added, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I remembered from childhood, you're a public defender, Alex. Managing large sums of money isn't really your expertise. We could help take that burden off your hands. The burden of preventing my family from becoming felons. How thoughtful. That's very considerate, I said. But I think I can handle it. Rachel's face tightened. Alex, be reasonable. You live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You're clearly not interested in building wealth. Why hold back the rest of us? Because building wealth through money laundering tends to result in federal prison sentences, but I didn't share that observation. Rachel, I said carefully, when did you last visit Dad before he died? She shifted uncomfortably. I was busy with the house renovation. You know how contractors are. Kevin, I meant to visit more, work's been crazy. But you both had time for Jake's investor dinner. The room went silent. Rachel studied her manicured nails while Kevin suddenly found my ceiling fascinating. Alex, Rachel finally said, her voice softer, we know you're upset about the memorial service, but families sometimes have to make difficult choices. Stop, I held up my hand. Just stop right there. You want to talk about difficult choices? Let me tell you about difficult choices. I stood up and walked to the mantel where Dad's Purple Heart sat next to his law degree. Difficult choices are deciding whether to prosecute your own son for embezzlement. Difficult choices are choosing between family loyalty and professional ethics. Difficult choices are sitting alone at your father's memorial because your siblings chose networking over respect. When I turned back around, both siblings looked uncomfortable. Now, I continued, my voice steady as granite, you want to make another difficult choice about Dad's money. The money he specifically structured to prevent exactly this situation. Kevin's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean Dad knew about Jake's money laundering operation. He documented everything, the shell companies, the fake clients, the transferred funds, everything. Rachel stood up abruptly. That's impossible. Jake's a legitimate entrepreneur. Jake's a criminal and Marcus is his accomplice. Dad spent his final months gathering evidence to protect the family name from your greed. Kevin opened his mouth to protest, but I wasn't finished. The partnership agreement specifically states that Dad's equity can only go to a family member with legal experience and demonstrated commitment to public service. I'm the only one who qualifies, but even if that weren't the case, I wouldn't give you a penny to fund criminal activity. Rachel's mask finally slipped. Fine, be self-righteous, keep it all for yourself. But don't expect us to support you when you're old and need help. The threat was so predictable I almost laughed. Rachel, when have any of you ever supported me? When Dad was dying, did you visit? When I was handling funeral arrangements alone, did you offer help? When I needed family support, where were you? She opened her mouth to respond, but I continued. You were renovating your kitchen while I sat in hospital waiting rooms. You were networking while I held Dad's hand during his final days. So your threats about future abandonment ring hollow. You've already perfected the art of absence. They left without another word, but I knew this was far from over. Marcus would escalate, probably involve lawyers or private investigators. But I had something they didn't expect. Dad's evidence file and a burning desire to honor his memory properly. Wednesday morning brought Detective Sarah Chen to my office at the Public Defender's Department. She sat across from my desk with a thick folder and a grim expression. Alex, I worked with your father on several cases over the years. He contacted me 3 weeks before he died about a potential financial crimes investigation. He did. I tried to look surprised. He suspected family members were involved in money laundering through fake business investments. He gave me preliminary evidence, but asked me to wait until after his death to act. He didn't want to destroy the family while he was alive. Sarah opened her folder. The evidence he provided is substantial: bank records, email communications, recorded phone calls. We're looking at federal charges for money laundering, wire fraud, and racketeering. How many people are involved? Your brother Marcus, his law partner David Richmond, your nephew Jake, and at least 6 clients who were using the firm to clean drug money. Sarah leaned forward. Alex, your father specifically requested that I contact you before making arrests. He wanted you to know what was coming. Even in death, Dad was still protecting me from the family explosion that was about to follow. What do you need from me? Nothing, actually. Your father did all the work, but I wanted you to be prepared. This is going to hit the news hard. Prominent law firm in federal money laundering scheme makes for compelling headlines. That evening, I visited Dad's grave again, bringing a copy of the morning newspaper and the federal search warrant Sarah had shown me. Well, Dad, I said, settling into my chair, the federal agents are raiding Marcus's office tomorrow. The 20 years of evidence gathering finally paid off. The wind was still that day, as if the cemetery itself was holding its breath. Jake's investor meeting tomorrow is actually an FBI sting operation. Turns out his venture capitalists were undercover federal agents. Marcus is about to discover that his son's brilliant business plan was a trap. I opened the newspaper to the business section, where Jake's startup had been featured in a puff piece about innovative legal technology. The irony is beautiful, Dad. They wanted your money to fund their criminal enterprise, never realizing you'd already funded their downfall with 20 years of meticulous police work. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Hartwell, this is FBI Agent Rodriguez. The operation proceeds as planned tomorrow at 2 p.m. Your father would be proud. Dad had been working with federal agents for months, building an airtight case against his own family. The heart attack hadn't stopped his investigation. It had simply transferred control to people who shared his commitment to justice. Thursday, 2:15 p.m. I was reviewing case files when my phone exploded with calls and messages. Marcus, Rachel, Kevin, even some cousins I hadn't heard from in years. I ignored them all and drove to the federal building, where Detective Chen had invited me to observe the arrests from a conference room window. Marcus emerged from the building in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Jake followed 5 minutes later, no longer the confident young entrepreneur, just a scared kid who'd gotten in over his head with dangerous people. Your father spent 3 years documenting their activities, Detective Chen said, joining me at the window. He knew exactly what they were doing, but hoped they'd stop before crossing the line into serious criminal territory. When did he realize they wouldn't stop? When Jake started recruiting other family members. Your father called me the day after Jake approached you about investing your mother's insurance money. That's when he knew they'd never stop voluntarily. I remembered that conversation, Jake's awkward pitch about expanding the family's investment portfolio through his revolutionary platform. Dad had been in the room, quietly reading the newspaper, saying nothing, but he'd heard everything. The recordings your father made are devastating, Detective Chen continued. Jake explicitly discusses cleaning money from drug trafficking. Marcus talks about using client trust accounts to fund the operation. We have enough evidence to put them away for 15 years each. My phone rang again, Rachel's name on the screen. This time I answered. Alex, what the hell is happening? Marcus has been arrested. The FBI raided his office. I know. You know, how do you know? Dad told me this would happen. Silence stretched across the phone line. What do you mean Dad told you? He spent 3 years building a case against Marcus and Jake. He documented their money laundering operation and turned the evidence over to federal agents before he died. Rachel's voice cracked. That's impossible. Dad would never let his family dishonor his life's work. He gave Marcus and Jake multiple chances to stop. They chose to escalate instead. But Alex, this will destroy the family name. No, Rachel, Marcus and Jake destroyed the family name. Dad just made sure they'd face consequences for it. The call ended abruptly, but within minutes my phone was buzzing again. Kevin, cousins, even Marcus's wife Linda. They all wanted to know how I'd known about the arrests, whether I could help with bail, whether I had access to family money for legal fees. The family that had ignored Dad's memorial service was suddenly very interested in family loyalty. I turned off my phone and drove home, stopping to buy a bottle of Dad's favorite whiskey. That evening I sat in his study, now mine according to his will, and read through his final letter one more time. Alex, if you're reading this after the arrests, then justice has finally been served. I'm sorry you had to watch your brother and nephew destroy themselves, but some lessons can only be learned the hard way. The partnership money is yours now, along with the house and all my personal effects. Use them wisely, and remember that sometimes the greatest kindness is allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. The letter continued. I've arranged for Jake's ex-girlfriend Sarah to receive a scholarship from the Bar Association. She tried to warn him about the money laundering, but he wouldn't listen. Good people shouldn't suffer for associating with criminals. I've also set up a fund for Marcus's children. They'll need college money now that their father will be in federal prison. Even in planning his revenge, Dad had protected the innocent family members. One last thing, son, check the bottom drawer of my desk. I left you something that might restore your faith in family. I opened the drawer and found a thick photo album labeled Alex's Greatest Hits. Page after page of pictures from my public defender cases, clients I'd helped, families I'd reunited, justice I'd served for people who couldn't afford private attorneys. The final page contained a newspaper clipping from last year. Public defender Alex Hartwell wins wrongful conviction appeal, frees innocent man after 12 years. Dad had highlighted the quote where I'd said, "Justice isn't about money or status. It's about doing what's right for people who have no other voice." Below the article, Dad had written, "This is what I'm proudest of. Not the partnership money, not the judicial appointments, but raising a son who chose justice over profit. The money is just a tool, Alex. Use it to keep being the lawyer I always hoped you'd become." 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse where Dad had presided for 20 years, watching Marcus and Jake receive their sentences. 12 years for Marcus, 8 for Jake, and full restitution to the clients whose money they'd stolen. Marcus looked across the courtroom at me, his face a mixture of hatred and disbelief. He still couldn't understand how Dad had outmaneuvered him so completely. After the sentencing, I drove to the cemetery with another letter, this one from the Legal Aid Society, thanking the William Hartwell Foundation for funding legal services for low-income families. Dad's partnership money was now providing free legal representation for people who needed justice but couldn't afford it. "Well, Dad," I said, placing fresh flowers on his now-completed headstone, "the money went exactly where it belonged. Not to fund criminal enterprises or renovation projects, but to help people who need lawyers but can't pay for them." The autumn wind rustled through the maple trees, carrying the sound of distant laughter from a children's playground. Life continuing, justice served, balance restored. Marcus and Jake got 12 and 8 years respectively. They'll have plenty of time to think about the choices that brought them here. And Dad, your partnership is now funding the kind of law practice you always believed in, justice for everyone, not just those who can pay. I pulled out my phone and opened the legal aid app I'd helped develop with Dad's money. 53 new cases this month, from tenant rights disputes to immigration hearings. Hundreds of people getting legal help they desperately needed. Thanks for the lesson in long-term planning, old man. Sometimes the best revenge really is just letting justice take its course. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Jake's ex-girlfriend who'd received the bar scholarship. She just passed her bar exam and wanted to join the Legal Aid Society. "Mr. Hartwell," she wrote, "I'd like to work for the foundation that gave me a second chance. Your father believed people could change if given the right opportunities. I'd like to spend my career proving him right." I smiled and typed back, "Dad would love that. Welcome to the family business." The real family business, not money laundering or social climbing, but using law to help people who had nowhere else to turn. Dad's final lesson was his greatest. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply building something better from the ashes of other people's greed. And if you're reading this story, I hope you'll remember that justice isn't always immediate, but it's always worth waiting for. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters.